The Middle East is one of the most complex and unstable regions on the planet. For centuries, it has been a stage for religious disputes, territorial wars, and power struggles. But amidst all this, there is one element that keeps the world's attention fixed on it: oil. It drives economies, defines alliances, and often ignites conflicts. And it was in this volatile environment that Donald Trump took office as President of the United States, bringing a completely different approach from his predecessors. To understand Trump's impact on the Middle East, it's essential to rewind a bit and remember how the United States had been dealing with the region before his administration. During Barack Obama's presidency, there was an attempt to build bridges through dialogue, even if that sometimes meant upsetting traditional allies. The Iran nuclear deal was a clear example of this. The idea was to restrict Iran's nuclear program in exchange for economic relief. But when Trump took office, he saw this deal as a disaster. And he didn't just criticize it. He pulled out of it, calling it the worst deal ever negotiated. This decision had immediate consequences. Iran, which had begun to comply with parts of the deal, returned to enriching uranium at levels that alarmed the international community. Neighboring countries like Saudi Arabia and Israel felt threatened, while the U.S.'s relationships with European allies who supported the deal were also strained. In other words, Trump's decision wasn't just about Iran. It was about repositioning the United States as a direct and unpredictable force on the global stage. And it's impossible to talk about the Middle East during Trump's presidency without mentioning Israel. For many American presidents, supporting Israel has always been a priority, but Trump took it to a whole new level. In a move that shocked the world, he recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital and relocated the U.S. embassy there. For Israel, this was a historic triumph. But for Palestinians, it was a betrayal, a blow to their hopes for a future Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. Of course, this move came with consequences. Protests erupted across several Arab countries, leaders condemned the decision, and even close U.S. allies in the region were uncomfortable. But Trump had a clear goal: to solidify Israel's position as the leading power in the Middle East. And he didn't stop there. During his administration, the so-called Abraham Accords were signed, bringing historic agreements between Israel and countries like the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. Now, it's important to understand why this was so significant. For decades, the idea of Arab countries recognizing Israel was almost unimaginable without resolving the Palestinian issue. But Trump changed that narrative. He bet on economic and strategic interests, and the gamble worked. Yet at the same time, he left the Palestinians even more isolated and with less hope for a peaceful resolution. Another striking decision was the withdrawal of American troops from Syria. Trump argued that it was time to pull the United States out of endless wars, a sentiment that resonated with many Americans tired of seeing their soldiers fighting in conflicts with no clear end. But in practice, this came at a high cost. The Kurds, who had been crucial allies in the fight against ISIS, were left vulnerable. And Turkey, seizing the opportunity left by the U.S. withdrawal, intensified its military operations against the Kurds in the region. Additionally, the troop withdrawal created a vacuum that allowed Russia to expand its influence in the Middle East. If the U.S. had previously been seen as the region's guardian, the withdrawal paved the way for powers like Russia and even Iran to increase their presence, reshaping the balance of power in ways we are still trying to understand. But perhaps the most explosive moment of Trump's presidency in the Middle East was the assassination of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. Soleimani wasn't just any general. He was one of the most powerful figures in Iran, considered the architect of the country's military operations across the region. When an American drone killed him in Baghdad, it wasn't just a message, it was a declaration of war. Iran responded with attacks on American bases in Iraq, escalating tensions to a level unseen in years. Many feared this would mark the beginning of a direct conflict between the U.S. and Iran, something that would have devastating consequences not just for the Middle East but for the entire world. While a full-scale war didn't erupt, relations between the two nations have never been this strained. Of course, throughout all of this, Trump faced fierce criticism. Many argued that his actions increased instability in the Middle East, creating new enemies and strengthening powers like Russia and Iran. Others believed he acted with strategy, bolstering allies like Israel and reducing America's involvement in conflicts that seemed unsolvable. But regardless of opinions, it's undeniable that Trump's decisions left deep marks on the Middle East. His choices redefined alliances, reignited old rivalries, and changed the way the United States is perceived in the region. Some of these changes may bring benefits in the future. Others, however, could lead to new wars and crises. And that's the central issue. The Middle East is a chessboard where every move can trigger a chain reaction. Trump's actions were bold, controversial, and often unpredictable. But as any chess player knows, it's not always possible to foresee all the consequences of a move. If you enjoy understanding the behind-the-scenes of global conflicts and how political decisions shape the world we live in, subscribe to the channel. Here, we bring you relevant topics with deep analysis so you can understand the stories behind the headlines. And remember, on the chessboard of geopolitics, nothing happens by accident.